reality exists only where we create a focus. You and I are learning how to focus an energy through the way we feel about our world. It's not what we verbalize, it's not what we command, it's the way we feel the world in our heart. That focus is important because it leads to what is called the great spiritual mystery that says that there's a focus we create in consciousness that triggers a process inside of our bodies. It interacts with the forces of creation. It affects our physical world. This is the key. A focus we create in consciousness affects our bodies and our world. Observation creates reality. What we now know is the way we feel, our expectations about our world literally are rearranging the stuff our world is made of on subtle levels if it's a passing expectation. But if we can hold that focus and be very clear about where and how it happens, that is where the miracles happen. That is how you bring change into your world. I'm going to share some new science. We're going to have the opportunity to go back into Tibet to a different monastery and see different monks, different abbots. We're learning about a language that has no words. It's the nonverbal language of the human heart that has been referenced in a poetic sense for a very long time. But now our own science is telling us that the heart, your heart, from the moment you take your first breath in this world, your heart begins to commune. And I'm going to be really clear about this word. Do you know that the word prayer does not exist in the ancient Jewish, the ancient Christian, or any of the texts prior to 1700 years ago? There is no word prayer. The word prayer is an artifact of human interpretation, human intervention. When you go back into the original texts and you retranslate, whether we're talking about the Sumerian or the Aramaic or the original Hebrew, the word prayer does not exist. Do you know what word they use? It's a beautiful word. Commune. Doesn't it have a different feel than prayer? When we're praying to something or someone or a being or an entity, to me that feels very different than communing, having a communion with the forces of this world. So we're learning about this language that we speak. Every moment of every day, you're having a conversation with the stuff, the literal field of energy that holds this universe together. You're communing with that field right this minute. And the question is, do you know what you're saying? Well, the answer to that is in the world around you. It's in your checkbook. It's what your balance looks like. It's in your relationships, in your workplace, in your intimate relationships, your friends, your family. It's in the success of your heart's desire. All of those things are the field answering the communication and the conversation that you've been sharing for a lifetime. And from the perspective of the ancients, there really isn't a right, wrong, good, or bad. It's just about us recognizing that we're in this feedback loop. There's a feedback mechanism out there, and if we don't like what we're seeing, we're given the tools to change that, and that's really important right now. I asked for a show of hands in the room yesterday. There were about 600 people in the room, and almost everybody said, man, it feels like something big is happening. It is. And the experts are telling us that something big is happening. It's not our imagination. And the reason it's happening is because you and I are living this rare convergence of great cycles of time, unlike anything ever seen in 5,000 years of recorded human history. Now, our own scientists within the last couple of years have just begun to understand that where Earth and our solar system is located in an orbit around the center of our great Milky Way galaxy. It's called the Great Central Sun. I know you've heard of that before if you study ancient texts. Where we are in our journey around that source of energy at the center of the Milky Way determines in large part what happens on this planet. It determines things like climate change, weather patterns, whether or not the sea levels are high or low, whether or not the ice caps are frozen or melted, whether or not it snows in North Dakota in July, whether or not we can grow food in Colombia in September. It determines all of those things, but even more than that, it determines great leaps in spiritual growth on this planet, because when the world changes, you and I have to change to accommodate that change. We've got to change our lives to accommodate whatever's happening on the earth. Well, that's what's happening right now. Why are all these things happening right now? What we found yesterday is that you and I, we're living the end of a 5,000-year-long cycle. If you're taking notes, it's actually 5,125 years. And it's interesting because this cycle happens to coincide with human history as we know it today. So these great cycles of time determine, in large part, what happens on our planet and how we respond. This 5,125-year-long world age is what it's called, happens to coincide. Everything we know is recorded human history happened in this cycle. Now, our belief systems and our science in the past, they believe this is all there was. They think that the beginning of human history was 5,000 years ago. But what the ancients said is that's just the beginning of this cycle. There was another cycle before that. And there was another cycle before that. And now our archaeologists are beginning to find the evidence that bears that out. Now, I mentioned this yesterday. I'm going to say it right now because this is why you and I are living such a rare, precious moment in the history of this planet. In the cycles of the past, when the world changes, people choose to respond to that change in one of two ways. If they see the world change and the things that are familiar disappearing, they will fight one another, violent competition, to try to keep everything as it was in the way that they're comfortable. And in the last cycle, 5,000 years ago, that is the way human civilization chose to respond. And the war was so bad that nobody won. And they were forgotten for 5,000 years until the archaeologists began to recover the remnants of their civilization. I talk about this in the new book. Something big is happening. We want to get it right. We want to do it well. There are other civilizations that work together. The cycle that we're living right now, this time of change, what the records show is that it is a very intense period of time, but it's brief. It will only last about this generation. It'll be over in a few years. And then the world will be as it is going to be for the next cycle. But we're the generation that bridges these two ways of being. What do you think the chances are of being on this planet at precisely the time when we end one way of being and begin the next? When we end a 5,125-year-long world age that happens to coincide with the end of another cycle that's about 26,000 years long, that happens to coincide with us crossing the equator that separates the top from the bottom of our Milky Way galaxy. All three cycles are converging right now. So if it feels like a special time in the history of this planet, it is. And these are the reasons why. This is what we did yesterday. We said that these world age changes, they bring changes in the planet, magnetic fields, climate, sea levels, and resources. And when those things change, cycles of war and peace are directly related to this. That's all the big stuff. It comes right down to our everyday lives, the way you and I feel about ourselves, our bodies, our relationship to the world, our relationship to one another. Political cycles, economic cycles, they're all linked to these global cycles. So the crash in the economy, if we knew how to read the cycles, it wouldn't have been a surprise to anyone. Those that know the cycles knew that crash was coming. They didn't know the magnitude, but they knew it was happening. And they knew it was happening the last time because it works in cycles. Our spiritual growth is linked to these cycles, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. The first of these is that when I was in school, when you were in school, if your kids are in school right now, the science classes are teaching them that the space between things is empty. That the space between you and me, that there's nothing there. When you look at the nucleus of an atom and that first electron, that the space in between is empty. It's flat out wrong. But we have an entire civilization based on the belief that everything's separate from everything else. And that what happens in one place has no effect on what happens somewhere else. We've built our lives that way. It's wrong. The second discovery, your inner experiences of thought, feeling, emotion, belief. Heart-based thought, feeling, emotion, and belief. Speak to the stuff that holds everything together. You communicate with the stuff that holds this world together. And it goes so far, we've even found that human emotion is so powerful that on 9/11, when the world watched the unfolding of what was happening in the United States on that day, our satellites 222 miles above the surface of the earth were picking up the changes in human heart fields of the magnetic fields of the earth and relaying that information back to scientists every 30 minutes. Scientists said, my God, we really are linked. We really are part of all that is. The satellites in space are picking up the magnetic fields of human hearts. So, I want to begin this morning. My man brain, when I hear things like this, I want to believe that we're all one. I want to believe that everybody's related. I want to believe that those fields are out there, but I need to see it. Because we've all been told that we're one, and we've all been told that we're related. And I've been in so many workshops, I know many of you have as well. People say that. How many workshops have you been in where you go in and the speaker says, you're a powerful being? And you write down, I'm a powerful being. And you know what I'm talking about. Then you are connected to all that is. Okay, I'm connected to all that is. You are one with all beings. You are one with all beings. Take a deep breath. Visualize yourself by a bubbling brook and feel that oneness. And then you get up and go to lunch. And how real is it? So the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, I'll just tell you a little bit. I was born a Cancerian male. Anybody know about Cancerians? Cancerians live in the world of emotion. Well, I'm a double Cancerian. And depending on how you run the charts, I've got 6 planets in the 12th house, and every one of them is in Cancer. So my world is about emotion. That's the only reason I'm saying that to you. And to tame that, my man brain had to learn a way to negotiate those emotions. And what I found for myself, and I think this works for a lot of people, is if we give our left brain, our logical brain, something to work with, once it is quelled and satisfied, it will step out of the way and let us move into our hearts. I work that way, and I think many of you probably do as well. So I'm going to honor the way that I believe we learn, our left brain, our right brain, our hearts. I wanted to see how real this field was. Well, your tax dollars are paying for a satellite. You've probably never even seen the results of what this satellite has found. So I want to share this a little bit with you. How many have heard of the Chandra X-ray Observatory? About 6 people. Your tax dollars are paying for this amazing piece of equipment orbiting the Earth called the Chandra X-ray Observatory. I would think that every one of you would have a beautiful hardbound book of all the Chandra images that have been captured over the years. Okay, now this is interesting because scientists believe that the space between things is empty. That's what's been taught. Look at the NASA mission statement for Chandra. To detect invisible fields of energy in, quote, empty space, unquote. So our own scientists are saying maybe it's not so empty. Maybe there's something up there. Okay, so here's what Chandra is doing. First of all, you all heard of the Hubble Space Telescope, right? Okay, this image is from the Hubble Space Telescope. Where these arrows are is the center of the universe, not the Milky Way, but the universe where scientists believe everything began with a Big Bang a long time ago. That's a male-oriented term. It was a male scientist that called the beginning of the entire universe the Big Bang. You know that. His name was Fred Hoyle. It was 1951. I know that because when I asked female scientists, what would you call the beginning of the entire universe? They say, well, we wouldn't call it the Big Bang. They said we'd call it something like the first dawn of the new breath, of the new beginning. But we got the guy out there in 51, and we're looking at the Big Bang, and it happened right here, okay? Okay, so this is what Hubble Space Telescope is seeing with the naked eye. This is what you could see if you had the vantage point of Hubble. There's no special equipment going on here. Okay? And what I'd like for you to see from this is see how these galaxies, they're a little fuzzy around the edges, but they're pretty much separate from one another, aren't they? I mean, this is separate from this is separate from this. Okay, now, the Chandra telescope is looking at the same place, but it's using special equipment that can see the, quote, empty space and the invisible fields. Now, don't blink because you're going to miss this. So the next image you see is what Chandra sees looking at the center of the universe and see if everything still looks separate from everything else. Isn't that beautiful? I remember when I first saw that, the first thing I thought of it felt to me like a web or a net, which is precisely the way the ancients described the field that holds everything together. The Hopi talk about spider grandmother weaving the web of creation. Or the Hindu traditions talk about the great god Indra wove her web in a faraway abode so that we could have this world. There's no empty space in the universe, and this applies down to the level of the atom. Everything in the atom is connected. We are all part of this massive, vibrating, pulsating, illuminating field of energy, and we're only learning about what it means for us to communicate with this field. Does it help to see that? You'll think about that a lot. It helped me to see it as well. Okay, NASA has another satellite your tax dollars are paying for called the COBE or COBE. It's pronounced both ways. COBE or COBE is imaging the radiation that's left over from the moment our universe began. So with the Big Bang, there was a release of energy, and there are remnants of that energy still out there. And the scientists are saying if we can map where that energy is, it gives us an idea of the shape of our universe. Okay, and they're looking at different wavelengths, it's like looking through different glasses, different lenses. Okay, so this is the first image you're going to see are all the wavelengths together. It's the composite wavelength, and this is what our universe looks like right now. This is the entire universe. It looks kind of cool. There's a lot we could talk about here. You know, there are many places in this program where one image we could talk about for the rest of the morning. And this is one of those places, but we're not going to because we're going somewhere. This is a cool image, and you see a little bit of a shape on here, but we're going to look at a different wavelength now. And if there are any numerologists, if you're a scientist or an engineer, this is the 53 gigahertz wavelength. But if you're not, and you don't care about that, if you're a numerologist, 5 and 3 is the number 8. It's God's number. So you can either say we're looking at 53 gigahertz or we're looking at God's number, and you said the same thing. So when we narrow down only to these wavelengths, this is the exact same image looking at only the wavelengths of God's number. And look at what this looks like. Does that look like any kind of a shape that you've ever studied in ancient healing traditions? Anything to do with balance, maybe? What does it look like? Exactly. Does it look like anything like that? I'm glad you said yes because I put that image there. If you said no, it wouldn't work at all.